Welcome to Real Estate Coaching Radio, starring award-winning real estate coaches and #1 international best-selling authors, Tim and Julie Harris. This is the #1 daily radio show for realtors looking for a no BS, authentic, real-time coaching experience. What's really working in today's market, how to generate more leads, make more money, and have more time for what you love in your life. And now your hosts, Tim and Julie Harris.
3, 2, 1, and we're back. And today's podcast is all about helping you guys to be able to talk about the current events in real estate and state the facts and not the fiction. I'm going to give you 2 quick announcements prior to that. Announcement number 1, yes, indeed, finally, Ethical Real Estate Professional, along with Premier Coaching 2.0, is going live. And we're going to be announcing your invitation to a webinar that we're going to be doing sometime in the first or the second week in March. So check your email for that. Number 2, as always, our notes are available exclusively on harrisrealestatedaily.com. So if you want our notes, go over to harrisrealestatedaily.com and subscribe to our newsletter. And that is where you'll find all the notes to all of our podcasts, as well as some exclusive newsletter content as well. It takes 2 seconds to subscribe. All you got to do is drop in your email address, then pop over to your normal email and just confirm that you want the subscription. That's it. Nothing more to do. And then you'll get that day's daily notes sent directly to you along with the podcast. So all great stuff coming your way. Julie Harris.
Yes. All right. So today's talk is about facts, not fiction. This is going to give you a lot of talking points for your lead follow-up, for your prospecting, for running into people, and your center of influence, of course, remembering that knowledge equals confidence and ignorance equals fear. So know this week's talking points. Stop being a secret agent. Challenge yourself to have at least 10 conversations daily, yes, I said daily, about real estate. And we're going to give you 8 different topics that you can talk about that keep you current, make you a specialist, and lead you into more appointments.
Now, I want to start out by saying, again, today's notes are incredibly vital that you guys get those. Julie does an update show like this maybe once every 2 weeks, because you want to have these facts when you're talking with consumers, because depending on, frankly, which channels the consumers are dialing into, they might be full of, malarkey as far as the information that they have. And you want to respectfully, with love, show them the realities of what's going on in the real estate market. Because the realities are that due to a lot of changing circumstances, it appears that we are setting ourselves up for a really fantastic real estate market. And Julie and I are going to be giving you some facts as we go throughout this. But remember, get these notes, go to harrisrealestatedaily.com.
All right, point number 1, rising inventory levels. Many of you have been wishing for more and more inventory for literally years, right? So as of December 2024, now why do we use that? Because that was the end of the reporting for last year. We're not all the way through first quarter, so this is actually as updated as it gets. As of December 2024, active home listings reached 871,509, marking a 22% increase from December of 2023. Now, for comparison, remember that back during the pandemic years, we got as low as only 240,000 active listings. So this is significantly higher. However, even though it's up almost to 900,000, this figure remains approximately 16% lower than December of 2019 levels, when active listings stood over 1 million. Now, why do we always go back? You hear economists, you hear a lot of people reporting back to 2019. That's the last year that was deemed somewhat normal, because it wasn't a pandemic year, and it wasn't like a recovery year.
Well, I'm looking at your notes, and it's worth mentioning. I think this is the 5th straight week or something like that where interest rates on 30-year fixed are below 7%.
Right around 7, yeah.
Yeah, so that's pretty good news too. So you have more available inventory. I didn't realize, Julie, that's an interesting point, that the inventory levels are basically where they were effectively 6 years ago. So that's really good, actually.
It is really good, because remember, that was a big swing. Pandemic years, almost down to 200,000, which was virtually nothing countrywide.
And we know for a fact that most of the country had a rather slow start to the year, and that was all more or less predictable. There were snowstorms, but there was also a lot of, people focused on the election. So now that that's over,
yes,
you're going to see the folks that would have bought and closed in January and February, they're going to start buying and closing in February, March, and April.
It's starting to happen. Now, keep in mind, unlike during the pandemic years where virtually the whole country worked kind of in lockstep, we do have 9 states, including Arizona, Colorado, Florida, Idaho, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, and Washington State, that have indeed surpassed their pre-pandemic inventory levels. In those states, buyers in those regions, they have more options. Now, also note to self, guess what was not on that list, curiously? Washington, D.C. There were some reports. Remember, our theme here is facts, not fiction.
Well, but this goes to my earlier point, Julie. This is a really good thing you mentioned, because if you look at, hold on, sorry. Yeah, I do have a little bit of a cold live show. We don't edit. But yeah, so if you're watching CNN, MSNBC, and maybe even your local newspaper, they're talking about Washington, D.C. having this huge increase in inventory of homes for sale, and it's just not true. Julie and I knew it wasn't true when they started reporting on this like a month ago, because we have a lot of coaching clients in those markets in Northern Virginia, and they weren't saying it was an unusually large increase in homes for sale. That is a bunch of propagandized garbage.
Yes,
so make
speculation.
Sure, again, and so if you are, dealing with folks and their heads are full of that misinformation, this is a good opportunity for you to sprinkle a little bit of truth dust on them.
Yes, keeping in mind that, yes, you're going to hear, and it is true, that more than 77,000 government employees and government-related people have been downsized, let go, or voluntarily resigned. But that is not all concentrated in Washington, D.C. Yes, D.C., Maryland, Baltimore area has a higher concentration, but we've got coaching clients that were affected as far as Washington State. So, grain of salt with all those types of headlines. All right, point number 2, regional inventory variations. Florida and Texas now account for 30% of the nation's active listings. That's amazing. Florida and Texas together, right?
Well, but hover there. Why would that be true?
Well, we have lots of different reasons. There's, the condo market has always been full in Florida, but the insurance impact in Florida is one thing.
Well, you're bouncing, right?
Yeah.
So in Texas and Florida, you have some of the least red tape states for building new inventory.
That's true,
Texas
too.
especially. And so in Florida, despite the hurricanes, got its act together, and the insurance issue that you're seeing in California for homeowners insurance isn't really a problem in Florida. So, Florida and Texas continually lead the country for areas to consider as your home if you're not living there already. That is for sure.
That's right. And remember that those are warmer states that do tend to do better in the winter. When people from Canada want to move, the inventory does typically go up a little bit higher in the south during the winter. In contrast, many northeastern and midwestern states continue to experience significantly lower inventory levels, highlighting the importance of localized market strategies. Remember, of course, real estate is local. Monitor your own MLS hot sheets and Altos Research, and HousingWire has a great housing tracker. Not everywhere in the country, nor everywhere in your city, acts the same.
A lot of agents who are not, listening to us talk about national information, you might be thinking, well, how is this relevant to me? I'll tell you. Because even though you might live in Columbus, Ohio, like where Julie and I sold real estate, you're going to be dealing with a lot of folks that are thinking about moving to Columbus, Ohio. And if you're looking for information to be sharing on social, what's better to share information than, essentially to prove that you're more than just a local agent? Start talking about the national market as well. Not every post, not every share, but certainly showing the fact that you know what's going on in Atlanta, you know what's going on in, Iowa, where these folks might be moving from. That does make you seem a little bit more, I would say, knowledgeable, at the very least professional, I think was a better way of saying it than, say, for example, the local agent only knows their local neighborhood.
Yes, absolutely. So knowledge equals confidence, right? Okay, number 3, mortgage rate trends. The December 2024 Consumer Price Index, known as CPI, that report indicated a modest 0.2% month-over-month increase in core inflation, contributing to a decline in an average 30-year mortgage rate, which are about 7.1%. The shift may enhance affordability for prospective buyers. Remember, you can refer to our previous podcast about how to buy down rates and some other alternatives if 7% bothers you.
Well, again, Julie, I did see that there was 5 weeks in a row at less than 7%.
That's right. That's good. It's a good trend.
Good. Well, so let's talk a little bit, and we'll take a side step, and we'll go back on track, okay?
Yep.
So Fannie and Freddie, in our opinion, is definitely coming out of conservatorship. We won't bore you guys with that if you're not interested in it. But if you are interested in it, let me just share this with you. We did an interview with Keith Jensen on our Friday podcast, I think 2 Fridays ago. So make sure you go and listen to that. And one of the things I was most excited to hear Keith say, several things really, but the main one was that there's going to be a lot more mortgage products, a lot more competition. Fannie and Freddie right now have a lock, essentially. They decide what kind of mortgages that that the servicers and the banks are going to be allowed to issue. They're the ones that decide what the standards are. They're the ones that all these other, sort of monopolistic behaviors that they're able to deploy. And, after the housing crash, maybe that's what we needed, but that was 16 years ago. So one of the points that Keith made was, because Fannie and Freddie are so profitable that they're going to be in the position, if they chose to buy mortgage-backed securities. They're also going to be able to lower, because when they go privatized, they're going to have to start competing hypothetically like they did before with other institutions, banks in particular, that were doing the same thing that Fannie and Freddie did, securing mortgages and selling them effectively. So moral of the story is more competition never drives prices up, right? So just keep that in mind. So as the conservatorship with FHA, won't it? It's going to, in our opinion. And as that becomes more of a talking point thing on the major media and you guys are trying to understand how it's relevant, just remember this one point that I just said. When in the history of ever has competition driven prices up? It doesn't happen. So what Fannie and Freddie are going to, essentially what's going to happen after that is when they go back and they become private entities again, you're going to see more competition as they themselves have to start, essentially competing with, say, for example, maybe JP Morgan decides to get into the same business that Fannie and Freddie are in. Listen to the podcast we did last Friday. The moral of the story is that the 10-year is going to most likely be conducive to the interest rates going down. Fannie and Freddie are going to come out of conservatorship. You're going to see the interest rates drop. You're going to see new variety of mortgages. You're going to see the mortgage, frankly, and I'm not sure how I feel about this, but I think you're also going to see essentially standards in a lot of cases for mortgages to start becoming much more liberal as the lenders have to start becoming more competitive with each other.
That's right. And that does fit nicely, even though that's a bonus point, into our topic today, fact versus fiction, because there are some talking points out there, or headlines at least, that are more fictitious than that. And I'm glad that you mentioned going back to being privatized, because after 16 years, not everybody realized that they were private before this.
Yeah. I mean, guys, when Julie and I sold real estate, and when a lot of you listening sold real estate, you had a lot more variety of mortgages that you could help a lot of your borrowers in. And you guys think that, like, there's no real, again, I'm going to say this again. When has more competition caused prices to increase? It's counterintuitive because it just doesn't make sense. So you want Fannie and Freddie to have competition. You want interest rates to fall. You want there to be more different types of mortgages that are out there, more people that are going to be eligible to buy homes. And what was really fascinating is there's a lot of, they're saying, the people that want it to stay in government control. In other words, the people that want the government to essentially effectively control home sales. They want home sales to be socialized. That's really what they're talking about. Well, what's their rationalization? Well, interest rates will go up. So Keith and I talked about that on the Friday podcast, and there was absolutely no real valid reason to believe that mortgage interest rates will go up. Matter of fact, there's every reason, I just gave you a few of them, to believe that mortgage interest rates will go down. So I'm just sharing this with you guys. When Julie and I are optimistic about what's going to be taking place, most likely we're going to start feeling the effects of this in a matter of months. You guys need to realize that that's going to create, along with the increased inventory of homes for sale, very realistically, a genuine real estate boom. So you better get ready.
Yeah, that's right. And it's funny, you mentioned that before all of this, a lot of our career, there was a lot more variety. I remember a time when the going rate was 8 to 8.5%. For a couple of years, that was pretty normal. And I remember during that time, because I would go to all of our closings, that like 80 or 90% of what we were closing was either a 723 or a 525 loan, because you could get the lower rate for 7 years. The buyer thought they probably were going to move in the next 5 years anyway, and they'd never have to deal with a rate adjustment.
Well,
and so everybody closed with a 525 or 723.
723 is the most popular one. So basically your interest rate, now here's the cool thing, since we're talking about this, we're going to nerd out about it, evidently.
You started it.
I know. Well, so you'd have a 723. So for the first 7 years, your interest rate would be lower than whatever the 30-year fixed rate was, but you could buy the 723 interest rate down. So, for example, if the 723 was, let's say, for example, 5.5%, that's what the interest rate was for the first 7 years, rather. You could buy that interest rate down and make it even lower, and that's what almost all the builders did. And that's the way that the builders have traditionally, dominated a lot of the markets they're in, is because they make the payments lower.
And that wasn't weird. That was a normal thing.
Totally
that was
normal.
not subprime or anything weird like that.
No, the reason that the mortgage industry really, I think the whole real estate market's got into so much trouble ultimately, was there were like zero standards for mortgages.
It got out of control.
It got out of control. And it wasn't Fannie and Freddie that were issuing those garbage loans, by the way. Bank of America evidently was doing it. Wachovia was doing it. Subprime lenders were doing it. They're the ones that were essentially causing the big, huge, essentially real estate crash. And Fannie and Freddie were not. So there's a lot of misinformation out there that I learned a lot from that Friday podcast. So make sure you guys listen to it as well. And again, when this Fannie Freddie banter starts showing up on all your news feeds about real estate, and you're running into people while you're picking out avocados at the grocery store and they're asking you about it, you're going to pretty much know what news channels they're listening to, whether they're pro-release or anti-release. They're going to ask you about it. So use some of these talking points, again, to rise above the crowd. Knowledge equals confidence. Ignorance equals fear.
Yes, well said. All right, number 4. That was point 3.5. Point number 4, builder sentiment and incentives, one of my favorite topics. The National Association of Home Builders Sentiment Index rose to 47 in December 2024, nearing what they look at as a neutral threshold of 50. You can read about what goes into all those things. But notably, current sales conditions entered positive territory of a rating of 51 that suggests builders are cautiously optimistic about the market's direction. Now, what are builders doing? You talked about a little bit of it. To attract buyers, 56% of new home communities offered incentives in January of 2024, including mortgage rate buydowns, closing cost credits, and price reductions. When was the last time you heard about new construction reducing price? In fact, the national average of new construction is actually, that ratio between new construction and resale is actually getting smaller, which we haven't seen in a long time. I listened to a podcast called, I think it's called New Home Builder Podcast or something simple. And they were talking about shrinking the size of the house, changing the floor plans, and, bringing prices down. So that's something interesting.
Julie,
And I'll give you some examples.
Well, it would be interesting, and maybe you've come across this. So for example, let's just use Georgetown, Texas, where we used to live, okay?
Yep.
So in Georgetown, if you're comparing the, say, for example, a 3,000 square foot resale to a 3,000 square foot new construction home?
Sure.
I know the new construction home is going to cost more, but do you know as a percent how much more on average? Like, what can the builders get away with because the house is new and because they're offering really great interest rates on the mortgages?
I would have to calculate the percent, but I would say if you use Georgetown for an example, a 425 resale, which first of all would be hard to find.
Well, let's keep it realistic then. So probably 500,000.
Let's say
resale.
500.
And would you say so? What I've been answering my own question, like 600 to 625 new construction.
Possibly, yeah. I would say you're pretty close to that.
Isn't that interesting?
And even though you're 100,000 higher with a subsidized builder incentive buy down, the payment might be actually pretty close, at least for the first few years if they do a 3-2-1 buy down. So, for example, some builders are providing rate buy downs, offering, even with the going rate being 7%, a 3.99% rate for the first year, 4.99% the second year, and 5.99% fixed rate thereafter on select homes.
Now, be clear, listeners, you can do the same thing with your resale. You just copy what the lenders are doing, and oftentimes the lenders are doing it through third-party mortgage, third-party lenders themselves. I'm sorry, the builders are doing it through third-party lenders. So just go to the local builders, see what their mortgage deals are, look at the small print on the bottom of their flyers, their brochures, and then call up that, whatever bank it is and have them do the same thing. Find out what the math would be required for you to do the same thing with your resale. And then when you take a resale for $500, and the seller would realistically sell it for $475, maybe what you can do is when you take the listing, have the seller agree that they're going to set aside $25,000 to, whatever it actually is required financially, to be competitive with that new construction listing. And now how would you structure it? Is you'd make it so that the buyer would have to be willing to pay list price or $500,000 in order to get the mortgage buy down money from the seller, and that's on resale. So you can compete using the same creative mortgages that the builders use.
Yeah, you can meet them or beat them, right?
Yep.
So I know that probably went over some listeners' heads. What you do is talk to your lender, tell them, explain what you're trying to accomplish, and then they're going to produce a rate sheet for you based on the traditional method, 20% down, the normal, and then using seller subsidy. What does that look like? How much would it take? And what would your payment be? What kind of interest rate would that achieve? So don't feel like you've got to figure this stuff out yourself. A really great lender is going to help you, especially if you show them, hey, here's the new construction that we're competing against, and this is their finance program.
It's also worth mentioning, Julie, that if you decide to maybe, do a mortgage that's a 525 or 723 or whatever it's going to be, and this might sound crazy, but you can, assuming there's no prepayment penalty, which means if you pay the mortgage off early, and early could be, at any time really. If there's no prepayment penalty, you can refinance. Let's say you do a 723, and let's say the first 7 years the interest rate's lower. You can refinance from one 723 to the next, to the next, to the next. In other words,
that's right.
You can always have a lower rate. And so you got to learn all this stuff, guys, because that's what this new world is going to require. New world, old rules, basically, is what we're experiencing.
That's
and
right.
we teach you guys all this in Premier Coaching. I guarantee you that none of you are hearing anywhere else some of the things that we're sharing with you on this podcast. And you love this podcast. You listen every day. Thousands of you do. It's the number one daily podcast for real estate agents in at least the United States. We're 0.05% of all 5 million podcasts in terms of downloads in the world. That's what you're listening to right now. So if you love this podcast, and I know you do, make sure you become a member of Premier Coaching. We made it absolutely no-brainer, painless, simple for you. Just go to premiercoaching.com or click the link below to join Premier Coaching. And yes, you will automatically, if you're an active member of Premier Coaching, get the Premier Coaching 2.0 upgrade, which will include Ethical Real Estate Professional. So go ahead and just go to premiercoaching.com and enroll now, or simply click the link below in the show description. And yes, that does give you 30 days of free access. We want you to love Premier Coaching. So when you log in and you join, if you decide it's not for you, we love you, you love us. Wasn't for you, that's fine. Go on your merry way and you can cancel at any time. Okay? So no strings attached, but we know you're going to love it. We know you're going to stay, especially with the upgrade that we're about to introduce you to, along with Ethical Real Estate Professional. So scroll down below. Click the link below to join to join Premier Coaching, or just go to premiercoaching.com.
All right. Talking point number 5 is going to sound boring on the surface, but I'll tell you why it matters based on what we're talking about with mortgages. Number 5, homeowners associations are actually on the rise. In 2024, about 40% of properties in the nation, old, new, and otherwise, did include HOA fees. That's up from a little bit lower, like 2 points lower the previous year. The median HOA fee has increased 14% to $125 per month. And in places like Houston and Las Vegas, about 75% of listings have HOAs. One of the things that we're seeing is a trend towards older communities creating an HOA. Your job is to know, obviously, what that covers. But the issue that this is creating, that didn't have all the detail in there, was now that's another thing that a buyer may have to qualify for in a neighborhood they didn't think had an HOA. This is a trend that we're seeing, is the increase of HOAs. All right, number 6, wholesale inflation deceleration. December 2024, there was a modest 0.2% month-over-month rise in the producer price index, indicating a slowdown in wholesale inflation. Why do we care? Because that's good for the builders. More stable construction costs, potentially benefiting builders, which means buyers and ultimately you.
By the way, that is also with the tariffs. So
Yes.
Again, don't be brainwashed thinking that tariffs are a bad thing. And next time you are believing that tariffs are a bad thing and they're going to cause the zombie apocalypse, do remember that Trump is now talking about making it so that tariffs will replace personal income tax. And he's doing the math on it, even though people are saying it's impossible. Julie and I did do a previous podcast with the help of AI, and we showed you how the math might work for that. So keep your minds open to the possibilities.
All right, point number 7, our final one today, navigating local market dynamics. We're going to talk about average days on the market. The average time a property remains on the market varies significantly now between hot and slower markets. Again, a difference from the pandemic where everything acted the same. Nationally, homes typically stayed on the market for about 41 days in January of this year, an increase from 35 days in December 2024. Not really a big deal, right? But for some people, that's panic-inducing because it's not 41 seconds, it's 41 days. In hotter markets like Philadelphia, PA, properties spend an average of 11 days on the market before going pending. But conversely, in slower markets like Washington, D.C., the average days on the market increased from 52 to 57. Again, not terrible, but still a 9.6% rise. Those disparities underscore the necessity for all of you, our listeners, to tailor your strategies to local conditions. Make sure your seller knows what to expect. And remember, that's average. There are places, I know there's places, because I have coaching clients there. There are places in Texas and Florida, for example, where the average is more like 90 days. If the seller knows what to expect and you know what to expect, you can strategize in a different way than just assuming that things are going to sell overnight with multiple offers.
Well, when I heard that with your statistic, first of all, it's like big deal, a few days.
Well, I know, because we know it could be worse.
Right. Yeah, we've coached agents when it was far worse. But I'll say where the opportunity lies is there's a lot of agents out there that have taken listings in the last 6 months, 4 months, whatever, that did not prepare their sellers for longer days in the market.
That's right.
And maybe they didn't know, or maybe they're just afraid to tell the seller the truth. Whatever it was, the fact is the sellers are probably growing very frustrated and will most likely fire those current listing agents when the listings are expiring. So just see the opportunity, because it's everywhere, especially in a transitioning market. If we, as Julie and I are fond of saying, The greatest fortunes of men and women are always made during the greatest times of change. And we're definitely in one of those times now. So if you're not feeling optimistic, if you're feeling any way skeptical about the fact that your best days are in front of you, you've got to really put a hard stop to that and see the opportunity that's surrounding you, because it truly is surrounding you right now. If you're all stuck on politics and worried about interest rates for that matter, worried about days in the market, worried, that's not good. How's that working out for you? How's that actually helping you becoming the best version of yourself as a real estate practitioner? How is that type of thinking actually doing to help create more transactions for you and putting you in mentally and emotionally and ultimately financially in a position to help other people? You guys get it? So step away from all the bad news and look for all the reasons to feel optimistic, because you're surrounded by them. You really, truly are. And, I'm feeling this optimistic, not just because I understand all the potential ramifications of Fannie and Freddie and what's going to happen with interest rates and all the rest of it. I feel optimistic primarily, if for no other reason, and this is all it takes for me to realize housing's best years are still way ahead of us, is the demographics. The sheer number of people that are going to want to buy a house over the next 50 years is extraordinary.
Yes.
And I'm not talking immigrants. I'm talking about baby boomers. I'm talking about I'm talking about all the huge amount of people that are going to want to buy a house. The American dream of owning a home is still very much alive and well. And the number of people, when every survey comes out, asking any age group, again, be careful where you're reading the results of these surveys, because anytime you read a survey result where they say, millennials have given up on ever buying a home, that's not even remotely true, right? It's the same people that are saying, notice what I'm saying here, listeners, it's the same people that says you can be, everyone reaches peak happiness at $75,000 a year. It's the same people that say, millennials never have given up on buying a home. They're just going to spend all their money on experiences. It's the same people that say Fannie and Freddie should stay in conservatorship. Follow the agenda. They want government control, basically. They don't want you guys to really, truly embrace the fact that most people become millionaires, not because they won the lottery or inherited it. They become millionaires through real estate, and the primary vehicle is their own home. So most first-generation Americans that are millionaires, and it's a vast majority of all single-digit millionaires and even double-digit millionaires, make it from owning real estate in their own principal residence. Does that surprise you? So, the fact is that it's going to remain the American dream because everyone wants to own their home. That's just ingrained in all of us. But it's also one of the greatest wealth creators that, anything has ever created.
Well, the ratio is 40-1, Tim.
Talk about that.
40 times more wealthy in terms of liquid assets, or, even if you count their equity in their home, a homeowner is 40 times more wealthy than a renter is. Why? It's funny how much people say, oh no, the interest rates are 7%. Well, when you are renting, it's 100% interest. You're saving nothing. You're literally kissing your money goodbye. And yet nobody gets worried about that, right? If you have any question as to the demand still being stronger than the supply, all you have to do is 9 out of 10 times go to any open house. I talk to agents all week, every week, and the coaches, and you're still getting really great traffic to your open houses. And that's just people looking for open houses. That's not even people looking online right now as we speak. So there are still places, I know there's a lot of places where you're still getting multiple offers.
Well, the point is, what I'm trying to hopefully help you guys, vibe with what I'm trying to say is that if you're not, you have to be feeling optimistic. You have to be realizing that your best days are ahead of you. You have to be realizing that you are in the right place at the right time, selling the right exact product. You just are. That's just the truth. Your real estate license was the smartest. Getting that was the smartest thing you probably ever done. So congratulations, go you. Now make this your best year ever, or make this the continuation of a long series of best years ever with like a lot of our coaching clients, or make this the launching pad for your new real estate career. But you have to say, damn it, I'm going to do it no matter what. And if you're not feeling that level of energy and enthusiasm, you have to intentionally separate yourself from whatever basically is making you feel not optimistic or skeptical or fearful. Just purge all that crap from your mind and from your life. And then again, start locking in to the fact that you are indeed in a very blessed place in your life. Make the most of it.
That's right. If it's meant to be, it's up to me. That's the only thing you should be telling yourself all day long. So your homework, as we said at the top of this podcast, talk to at least 10 people a day about real estate You can't say that you have nothing to talk about, and you can't say that you don't have the facts, because that's why we do a podcast like this about every 2 weeks to keep you up to speed.
And get the notes. Go to harrisrealestatedaily.com and get our notes at harrisrealestatedaily.com. Have a fantastic day. We'll talk with you on the show tomorrow.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.